feature on.
Welcome DISD to part 2 of the Classrooms webinar series in SchoolNet. In today's webinar, we will be discussing about creating instructional materials as well as the student workspace within the Classrooms module. During this webinar, I will be presenting the content from a high level via the PowerPoint, and then I will go live on a Dallas demo site. And any time you can pause the recording and try activities out on your own, and when you're ready to move on, you can just restart the recording. Now, in part 1 of our series, we were exposed to how to search for materials and how to schedule those materials in our lesson planner. So in today's webinar, we're going to understand how to create instructional materials, and that will be resources and lesson plans, and then understand how to submit those materials. And then I'm going to give you a very high-level introduction to student workspaces. As I mentioned in part 1 and in all the webinars, there are lots of helpful resources available to you. You can find materials on PD Planner, and I will take you there at the end, where you can find quick reference cards, some end-user PowerPoints. You can also find screen-specific help on every screen, and you'll see a little orange question mark. And if you're interested in the hardware and software requirements, you can click on the bottom of any screen at the footer and select System Requirements. So as we mentioned in part 1, there are lots of instructional materials that are available to you. So as a review, what we did was we searched through some of these materials, but I also mentioned that you can create and submit your own materials. You don't have to submit them. You can keep them in your own, your own materials bank. You never have to have them submitted. But if you'd like to share them with other teachers in your school, then you can submit those for approval. So as we mentioned in part 1, we showed you how to search for a resource, search for a lesson plan by a keyword, how to look up different materials by a standard search. And then we also provided you with all the actions that are available when you find these resources. Now for today, we're going to be able to edit anything that we create, and then we're also going to show you how to submit it for approval. Anything that you create on your own or you find in the material search, you can save it and it will appear in your own materials. So for today, when we focus on creating our own, it will automatically be put into our materials bank. So let's also talk about student access. Now, we showed you in part 1 how to assign resources to students, and when the students log in, they'll be able to see what this assignment is. Now, on the second half of this webinar today, we're going to talk about how the students can actually use the section called Workspaces, and they could feasibly upload their completed assignment. So if you have assigned a resource to them, they can access it from their home page, and then they can actually upload the completed assignment. If it's a completely separate assignment and you didn't assign it to them, the students can still upload any materials into the workspaces. And then the last piece that we did in the prior session was we showed you how to schedule in a lesson planner as well. So now we're going to move into the new content. So there's a couple things that a teacher can create. They can create an instructional unit, they can create a lesson plan, they create resources. So the process to create these are very similar. There's just a kind of few less steps when creating a resource. And the way I like to do it is I like to actually create my resource first and then I create my lesson plan. But whatever material you create, you're going to go into Classroom's instructional material and you're going to select the link in the top right corner that says Create. And you can select the type of material you want to create and then say Go. What then appears are some required tabs that you will need to fill in. And on any type of material that you create, the first tab, which is the properties, is the required field. So you'll give your materials a name, a grade, a subject, and a description, and then you'll fill in some additional detail. When it comes into the actual creating of the content, you can choose one of 3 formats, but you can only use one. So you can use a district template, which allows you to enter the fields into the text editor below. If you have your lesson plan or resource as a separate file, you can then upload that file. Or if you're using a lesson plan from a specific website, you can use the URL. But just keep in mind, you can only use one of those formats. It is highly recommended that you align your standards to your resource, because you'll find out in Part 3, when you start assessing within the system and you have any item that's aligned to an assessment, any item that's aligned to a standard, you'll be able to find resources and materials to help support that instruction. And then depending on the type of resource, the type of material you're creating, these tab 4 may or may not appear. And then we have identifying organizers. And when I go online, I'll show you what each of these tabs include. Now, the nice feature is when you create a resource, which is like a handout or even a website, when you create a lesson, you can attach those resources to your lesson plan. That's why I like to personally create the resources first. So when you create your lesson and you get that section 4, which allows you to link related materials, then I can attach any materials that I want to support my lesson plan. And the nice thing is when you create these resources, you may be able to use them for multiple lessons. So you may have several lesson plans around measurement and geometry, and you have a similar handout that you use for students that you could link it to the multiple lesson plans. Now, the last thing you could do is you could actually submit your lesson for approval. And again, I'll show you where all these links are. So if I have any administrators on the line, or if anyone is interested in knowing what the process is, just be aware that in DISD, the principals, assistant principals, and your campus instructional coaches all have the approval, should we say, role to be able to approve any materials. So if you submit this for approval at your school, a designated administrator will have to approve that. And then once it's approved, it'll then be available to all the other teachers in your building. If it's really exemplar, that designated administrator can then submit it to the district. And then all the teachers in the district, if it gets approved at the district level, will have access to it. At this point, I would leave it at the school and speak to your administrators to help them understand how to approve it. And I'll show you again where the materials are to help support that. So at this point, I'm going to create instructional materials. As I said, I'm going to go live on the demo site, and I'm going to create a resource first, and then a lesson plan, and then I'm going to submit my material. So I'm going to log in as a teacher on our demo site, and I'm going to hover over Classroom Instructional Materials. And this is very much like we did in Part 1. In this area, I can search for existing materials, I can search by standards, I can type in a keyword. Remember, we discussed that instructional materials will default to the subject and grade range that you choose. And I can also go to my own materials right here. But for today, we're going to create new materials. So when I click on this Create, you're going to see the 4 things I can create. I can create an instructional unit, a lesson plan, an assessment, or a resource. So I'm going to start with a resource first. So when I select resource, I then will say go. And what will come up is 4 tabs. The section 1, which is the properties, is the required field. Anything with a red asterisk is required as well. And I'm going to call this the Solve the Equation resource. And it's going to be for math. I'm a math teacher, 7th grade. And I'm going to say students will complete this handout. I may give it more description. Usually don't put in duration when it comes to resources, but if it's a video or something, you can put in a duration. I'm going to change this to a handout or worksheet, and I am going to notate it as a handout for students. So that, remember in part 1, when we actually just searched for student resources, we can therefore find this when we label it for resources. If there's any other information, maybe I got this from a publisher, maybe I got it from a different website. I'm going to click on the additional properties. Now, there may be at times that there may be a site or a handout or something that may have a cost or has a restricted use. You may want to put some copyright information and keywords. Again, this is all, optional in this area. As I said, anything with the red asterisk is what is required. So at this point, I can choose Save and Continue, and now I'm going to move my way through the tabs above. So my next section is Aligning Standards. Now, as you can see, because I chose math and 7th grade, it's going to default to that standard set. So I can choose multiple standards, or I can click on the plus sign to expand it. If I click on the full name of the standard, it will populate it down to all the sub-skills in that standard. So if I click on it again, it will deselect it. Maybe I just want, 7.73 number and operations. Again, just click on the name, and it will link all the lower or sub-skill standards. Now, I can easily just click on the tab, and it will automatically save it, or I can scroll down, as you know, to the bottom and choose Save and Continue. Now, for resources, usually I'm going to use a file upload. When we create the lesson plan, I am going to enter text into the field. So I'm going to select File, and at this point I have to choose the file and then upload it. So I'm going to select Choose File. I'm going to go to my folder, and here is my handout called Algebra 1 Equations. I'm going to double click on it. It shows the file, but then I have to actually upload it. And now it shows the file there. If I want to remove it, I can. Now, one of the things that tends to get confusing is many teachers want to attach multiple resources. However, we can do that in the lesson plan, but not when we're creating resources. When we're creating resources, it's one attachment. Now, if you have a URL, you could feasibly use the template and enter in multiple URLs in kind of the text editor, but think about a resource as a single item that you would use in the class. But when we go into lesson plans, we can attach multiple resources to the lesson plan. So now I'm going to choose Save and Continue. And again, this area is all optional. I can select teaching methods, grouping, Bloom's taxonomy, Webb's DOK, Gardner's multiple intelligences. There's a variety of things that you can select. And basically, this just helps with the searching of the material and for information. So at this point, I can go ahead and save it, and the page is just going to refresh, and I have to get out of this actual page. So there's a couple of things that I can do here. I can view my material, I can cancel what I'm doing, or I can delete the material. Well, I really don't want to delete it because I've spent all the time doing it, so I'm just going to go ahead and select View Material. And now what I get to see is what I just created. My description, my subject, my format, is it for students? Down below here, I have the ability to see what the content is, and then the standards I align to it, and any other optional things that I attach to it. So at this point, I've created my resource. Now I want to know where it is. So when I hover over Classrooms and go to Instructional Materials, I'll go straight to my materials here. And what I'm going to see is I have the resource called Solve the Equations, and now I want to create my lesson plan. So I have the link right here to create a lesson plan. So when I say go, it's going to look fairly similar to creating a resource, but I have another tab here, and it's called Link Related Materials. And this is where I would link those resources. So again, in Section 1, it's the required fields, and I'm going to call this Modeling Equations. And I'll have to choose my subject area, my grade range, and since I already have this in a Word document, I can easily copy and paste it. Let's say that this is going to be 2 days or 2 class periods. I can say 2 days. So I could, if I wanted to, upload the Word document or just copy and paste. Now, again, I can view the additional properties, add any information if it's needed, and then let's choose Save and Continue. Again, I want to choose the standards, so maybe I want to expand it, click on the same standards, and choose Save and Continue. Now, just like I did with the resource, but I chose File Upload, this time I'm going to actually use the template. Now, as you can see, there's actually 5 different sections of the template. And what it does is it kind of breaks it up into different sections. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of real estate here so that I can kind of copy and paste what I want. And I'm going to put in my objective here. And then I can choose any of the sections and maybe just copy and paste whatever sections I want to include in this area. So maybe I don't need that tab. Maybe I want to include the instructional procedures, and so on. So I copied and pasted it. Again, I could upload it. If I have some additional notes, I can add any additional notes here. Now, be aware that this is a WYSIWYG editor, so if I wanted to, I can change the font size, color. I can, insert equations. I can insert an image. I can also put a hyperlink here. So if I wanted to include a hyperlink into the lesson plan, I could do that here. So there's a variety of things that you can include. At this point, I'm going to choose Save and Continue, and now I'm going to be brought into the linking of the related materials. Now, this is where we can attach our resources. So I have 3 ways that I can attach the resources or, additional materials. I can search it in the Public Materials Bank. I can search it in My Materials. So when I click on Search in My Materials, it automatically defaults to any material that correlates to the subject and grade range of the lesson plan. So because I created that Solve the Equations, I can click on this little blue arrow here that will link the resource. And as you can see, it will add it here. If I want to add additional resources, I can click on them, and now I have arrows so I can choose the order in which they display. And let's search in the Public Materials Bank. So in the Public Materials Bank, I can search by keyword, grade range. So maybe I want to look through 6th through 9th just to see what's there, and I press search, And here are all the different resources that have been published and are made available to me that I could actually attach. So I can then link this one, maybe I want to link this one. So as you can see, I've attached lots of different resources to my lesson plan. So remember when I created the resource Solve the Equation, it was one single handout attached. Now in the lesson, I actually have 4 different handouts available to support this lesson. So the last option is to actually create and link new materials. So if I wanted to, I could feasibly create my own handout right in here and attach the file, or if I wanted to use an actual website or audio or video, I could add it in here. It's up to you, but again, best practice is I like to kind of create it separately. And at this point, I'm going to choose Save and Continue. And now I'm brought to that identifying our organizers. So I may want to, click on some of these. Again, it's all optional. And I want to go ahead and save. And now I'm able to view my material. And what you're going to see here is this is my full-blown lesson plan. Here's that content area. These tabs are these headers are what was in those 5 different tabs. So I didn't have to create these. They just brought them in because they were part of the tabs of the template. There are my standards, and then down at the bottom are all the different resources. And when I click on the resource itself, when I click on the name of it, it's going to take me to that same exact resource page I was looking at before. So what I just showed you was how to create a lesson plan and how to create a resource and then attach that lesson plan to the resource. If you are interested in submitting these to your school to be reviewed and then made public for other teachers, you will find your activity, whether it be a lesson plan or a resource, and then you'll see this link right here to submit to School Bank. When I click on this, you're going to be prompted that once you submit it, it will either be approved or returned for revision. Now, once it's approved, it will become public, and then the item is available to other users. It will you can no longer edit it, or it will be attached to your materials. It'll be in the public materials bank of your school. So at this point, I'm just going to hit cancel. And then if you do submit it, you'll just want to be sure that your administrators are aware of what needs to be done to approve that, to make it available to other users. So at this point, I'm going to, if you'd like, you can pause the recording, create a resource, and then create a lesson plan and attach that resource. And then when you're ready to move on, you can return to the recording and we will continue into student workspaces. So hopefully you've had a chance to create materials and resources. And if you know what your process is to submit and you know someone who can approve it, then you can, could have gone ahead and tried that as well. So now let's talk about the student workspaces. So before we get into it, I want to be sure that you know the difference between, assigning a resource for a student and then the workspaces. So I'm going to go into my instructional materials. So when I hover over Classrooms and I go to Instructional Materials, I want to go to My Materials. So this is where you're going to find all of the resources and lesson plans and instructional units or curriculum or anything that you have created on your own or saved. So the lesson plan that I just created, I can go ahead and just click on the lesson plan itself, and at this time I can choose Edit to make changes to it, or as I mentioned earlier, I can submit it. I'm going to go back to my previous page, and on the left side, what I showed you in kind of part 1 is I have the ability to search for different types of materials. So I could limit it to just the materials I have created, or maybe I just want to look at the resources. So when I choose the resources, I can see here, if I have the option to assign it, then that means it's a resource for students. If I didn't get this assign option, it means that that handout was not considered for students. But you can always copy a resource you find, and if you think it could be used for students, then you can copy it and then edit it and make it your own. It won't make any changes to the original. So in part one, we did show you how to actually assign it to a section, and you gave it a due date, and you gave the student instructions, and then you assigned it to that section. So the nice feature of what Workspace is going to allow you to do is it kind of takes that assignment a step further, or can also be used separately. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint to give you really kind of a high-level overview and introduction to it, and then I'm going to demonstrate it online. So what you need to keep in mind is your students will have to log in. And all DISD students do have a login. It's really just a matter of the infrastructure and if you have the computers available to them. So the area the students would go is called Student Workspace. And think about Student Workspace as kind of like an e-portfolio, or a way for students to create and upload any of the work. And it really helps them to collaborate with you as the teacher for you to review and make suggestions on it. Now be aware that as the students are using the Student Workspace, that portfolio content will follow the students across their school year. So if they're using it for math grade 7 and then next year they're in math grade 8, they will still be able to get to their material. Teachers and instructional managers will have full access to any Student Workspace content. So the teachers themselves can create a portfolio for a student, or the students can create their portfolios as well. So a couple things to keep in mind between the two is, as a teacher or administrator, you can locate all your students in your section's workspaces. You can create portfolios, you can view and manage content, so you could even attach a work item, as we call it, to the students' workspaces. But what's different between doing it in Workspace as opposed to assigning it is you would have to attach it individually to every student. That's why the assignment portion of Student Workspace, that means of Classrooms, is the better option if you're assigning something to all students in a class. So you can add comments to Student Workspaces. You can view what the students are commenting. Now for the students, they can set up a new portfolio, they can add and edit content, which we call work items, they can view their teacher comments, and then they can make their own comments. So here's what the typical workflow is for Student Workspace for class projects. The teacher will assign a project to students, provide a due date, and some would prefer a naming convention. The students can set up a new portfolio or use an existing portfolio. The nice feature is for younger students, teachers may want to set up those portfolios themselves. Students will add content, and this is what is called as a work item. You do not add the actual work item or content into the portfolio. You add these work items into the portfolio, and they're individually named. Then the teacher can review the work item for each student and make comments, and then the students can view the teacher's comments. And it can be done collaboratively. So the teacher's reviewing it, the student gets the responses and makes any changes that are needed. So how can it be accessed? A teacher will go into Classroom Student Workspaces and choose the section they want to work with. At that point, they're going to choose a student in that section, and they're going to view all their portfolios, and at that point, they can create a portfolio and then add a work item. If they've already created a work item or a portfolio, then it will show you the number of items here. You can click on them, and then you can easily access it as a teacher. When clicking into the portfolio, this is where you're going to see all the work items. So you can change the way you look at the portfolio. You can do a tile view. You can look at content. You can drag and drop it and put it in different orders. On any item, whether it be the portfolio or the work items, you have an action menu that will allow you to move, delete, edit, and then you also have the ability to export it. So if a student is actually leaving the district, they could feasibly export their whole portfolio and take it as a kind of separate file. So all of the materials attached to it will be in a zipped file. So here's some details. When you get into the actual work item, you'll be able to add in a lot of text. You can add in several attachments. You can use images. You can use video. There's a lot of things that you can add. At this point, you can also, as we mentioned, put a comment. So maybe the student wants a response from the teacher. The teacher can then put a comment in here. If there are audio or video attached to it, you can play the video and audio files within that item detail or work item detail page. Some specifications you want to keep in mind is when adding work items to a portfolio, you can upload up to 100 attachments of any file type to a single work item. When uploading the files, the maximum size is 6 megabytes. And uploaded images will appear as in a thumbnail form on the Create and Edit page. And as I mentioned earlier, uploaded MP3 and MP4 files are available for inline playback, meaning you'll be able to see it and hear it right there in the work item. So at this point, I'm going to go to my login as a student first. And I'm going to show you how easily a student can create their work items and their portfolios. So when I sign in, for those of you who are in Part 1, this is where that assignment is for the student. So the student could feasibly select what their assignment was, put the hand in this complete assignment so they can go ahead and download the attachments and fit the computer and either hand it in or attach it to a portfolio as a work item. So over here on the left side is where you're going to find student workspaces. So the student's logged in and they just launched the student workspace. At this point, we're going to see what our options are. If I had already had some portfolios here, it would list it. But since I'm brand new to it, I have to actually create my portfolio. I have to give it a title, and I'm going to call it my Math 7 assignment. And I could put in a description if I wanted to, all my homework. If I want to link it to a class, I can. And this just helps me link it as a student, and then my teachers will easily access it. So when I select it as my Math 7 assignment, I'll be able to link it right to the class. And this is a required step. So I could link it to multiple classes if I like, if I kind of have an open portfolio. If I want to, I can give it a color if I like. Again, it's just more customized. And then I'm going to go ahead and save it. And what you're going to see here is literally there's nothing in the portfolio itself. It's just the name, and then I have actions. And at this point, I can edit my portfolio, delete the portfolio, or export it. But the content really sits in my work item. So when I say create work item, this is where I'm actually doing all of the work. So I'm going to call this my equation assignment, and I can either put in the answer here, here is the assignment, or, and as you can see I have a WYSIWYG editor, I have an equation editor, there are a variety of things that I could do, or I could use the attachment. So I could go ahead and upload my file. So when I upload my file, I'm going to go to my desktop, go to my different files here, and this is where that completed assignment is for me. I go ahead and click on Upload. It's going to show the type of file. I have 100 characters to type in, my completed assignment, or maybe I want to put my initials. And if I wanted to, I can upload a second file and select that here. Again, we can do multiple file attachments. And now I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now I've created a single portfolio along with a work item. And there's currently no comments because I just uploaded it. Now if I want to go back to my home, this is where I get to see my portfolios. So I can filter it by all classes or just see the portfolios for a specific class. And since that was the same one, it's just going to show there. So if I wanted to create another portfolio, I can do that as well. So now let's see what the teacher will have access to. So I'm going to go back to a different browser. I'm going to hover over Classrooms, and I'm going to access Student Workspaces. Now for the teacher, I'm going to have to choose which section I want to look at, and I'm going to look at my Math 7, and I can see right here all my students that have portfolios and work items. And there's Melanie, who has one portfolio and one work item. I can click on it, and it's going to show me what the work item is, as well as the portfolio, and I can look at all the different portfolios. When I want to access it, I can click on that portfolio, and I'm basically seeing exactly what the student sees. And as the teacher, I do have the ability as well to edit it or maybe move it to a different portfolio or delete it, because again, I'm the teacher and I probably won't want to delete it, but maybe I want to create a different work item for the student. So maybe it's a particular student that does need some extra work. So I'm going to say extra credit, and I don't have to put any text in here, but maybe I want to give them another, handout to do. And again, it lists the type of file it is, and you can put the name, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now what the teacher is going to see, as well as the student, will be that they actually have 2 assignments. So there's a breadcrumb trail here. So if I want to just go back to all the assignments, I can click on it. And I can go ahead and click on this actual work assignment here. And maybe I want to add a comment. If I click on the comment, I can say, great job, make a few edits on question number 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and post it. And then when the student logs in, they will receive a notification that they have a comment. And then this will start tracking that there is a comment right here. So now I'll go back to the student, and if I click on the home page, and I go back to my workspaces, and I go to my assignment, and go to the actual assignment here, I see that my comment is there. So the students, again, it's a collaborative effort back and forth between the teacher and the student. So as you can see, the teacher gets to see everything that the student sees and also has the ability to add in multiple portfolios and work items for all of the students in their section. This is a very powerful tool for, as I mentioned earlier, for portfolio creation, as well as sharing of assignments. So at this point, I'm going to have you pause the recording and just explore through student workspaces. Again, you'll need to have, student access, but students could do the portfolio or workspaces outside of the classroom. And when you're ready to move on, just, restart the recording. Hopefully you have been able to explore through creating materials as well as workspaces. And before I leave, I do want to mention where all of our, supporting materials are. So I'm going to go live onto the training site. And we mentioned about the help right in the question mark, which is kind of page specific. Or you can click on Educator Development and choose PD Search. From here, I can search for, let's say, classrooms. And what you're going to see is any resources that are available. So here's the resource to approve instructional materials. Here's the resource for student workspaces, submitting instructional materials. There's a lot of materials here that's going to support what we just showed you. So I want to thank you very much for your time. And if you are interested in joining us for part 3, we are going to discuss about reporting in classrooms and how all of these instructional materials can support instruction. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at another webinar.